Okay, let's get the event started on time. Welcome, everyone. This is our final Bentham Science special monthly event for 2025. My name is Scott, and on behalf of the Bentham Science team, welcome. Let's turn on the chat so everyone can say hello. There we go. Okay, I think we're all ready. Attendees can chat with everyone. Excellent. Okay, welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for making time for this final Bentham event of the year. It's a big one for us, and it was a fun one to put together. We went through and tapped into your most asked questions from this past year, from previous events, and also questions that you sent us, that you emailed us, and questions that you asked when you signed up for this event. So it should be an interesting one. And to help guide us through answers to these questions is my colleague and friend, Dr. Gareth Dyke. Gareth, how are you today?
I'm very, very well. Thank you very much. Not too bad. Feeling full of the early Christmas spirit, end of the year kind of Q&A extravaganza. How are you doing, Scott? Everything going well? Everything okay?
Great. Yeah, another lovely crisp day here in central Japan. And looking forward to this event because this is a fun one for us. We get to really tap in and look at all the questions that people have asked us over the past year. And it really helps us to get to understand the pain points that researchers are facing. And I always learn a lot from these events. So I'm looking forward to hearing your responses to our guests' questions.
And don't forget, if you have any other questions or any questions that we don't cover in our event today, you can feel free to put those in the Q&A, in the chat box, anytime over the course of this event, because we'll definitely have some time at the end to address any further questions, right, Scott?
We do. We've got some time left over, and we do have some bonus questions as well. So we're going to deal with the top 10 plus one. We added one, so it's top 11 questions, most commonly asked questions of this past year, plus some time for bonus questions as well, hopefully. And we've got guests coming from everywhere around the world. We've got Zimbabwe, we've got Nigeria, from India. Great to see everyone here. Thank you, Ethiopia. Thank you for joining us, everyone. We'd love to see researchers from all around the world.
Absolutely. Do let us know where you're from. We love that. That's really a good way to get these events started. Give us a bit of information about where you're from. Ask us any other questions. I can see that Pfizer is already asking questions about funding. We'll come back to that a little bit later on. Everybody attending this event gets a number of free gifts as well at the end, don't they, Scott?
Absolutely. We'll send out a certificate of attendance to everyone who joined today. Thank you very much, just to thank you for your time. And we'll send that out by email tomorrow. You get also the full video recording with transcripts, including the chat. It's a searchable, scannable recording. So don't worry if you miss anything. If you miss any of Dr. Dyke's tips tonight, you can always check out the video tomorrow and scan forward to find the answer to the question that you're looking for. And we'll send that out tomorrow around 25 hours, excuse me, 24 hours, excuse me, after the event ends. And so certificate, full video recording with chat. We'll send that to everyone tomorrow by email. So check your inbox.
Absolutely. I think we're about ready to get started. But before we do get to those top 10 plus one questions from 2025, who are Bentham Science? Let's get started with a bit of information about Bentham Science, our sponsor for this event today, Scott.
If you're not familiar with Bentham Science, if you're joining us for the first time, Bentham, as it says here, is a leading scientific, technical, and medical research publisher. I think these numbers are up to date. It might be a bit higher, but 166 or more online and print journals, 126 hybrid, 40 open access journals, many with impact factors, and more than 1,300 online and print books. And it's worth mentioning that Bentham Science is a member of COPE, the Committee on Publication Ethics. We're going to share with you a QR code in just a moment. So if you are a library manager, you can scan this QR code and you can get completely free access with no strings attached, no payments, no commitments for 3 months. So you can try all of Bentham's full collection of top quality journals at your institution. Just scan the QR code. The Bentham team will hook you up with a completely free 3 month trial so you can try them for yourselves and share them with the authors and researchers at your institution.
It really is worth doing. I mean, lots of people do access the Bentham content. Use this QR code. Perhaps you know a librarian at your institution or at another institution. You can take a screenshot of this QR code and send it over to them. It's a really great opportunity because all of that fantastic Bentham content that Scott was just talking about, all of those hundreds of journals with impact factors, great ebooks, you can access all of that content absolutely free for 3 months with this QR code. Stay updated on new articles that Bentham adds to the collections every month and opt in later for a subscription to continue accessing all the Bentham journals. Fantastic stuff. We're going to show you that QR code a little bit later on as well. But for now, what about those top questions, Scott? Should we get into the top questions of 2020, 2020? I almost say 2024, but it's 2025.
Not for much longer, though. Yes. These are the questions that our guests asked us the most over the past year. And we did actually take a science, or excuse me, an evidence-based approach to analyzing your questions. We took all of the questions that you had asked us in live events, in the Q&A chat, in the regular chat, people who have emailed us questions, and so on. And we ran them into the magic machine. That's a bit of AI assistance. We did some data analysis and came up with the most asked questions. In some cases, we combine questions into one just for clarity and simplicity. But yes, these are the questions that you had asked us the most. And we can see that these are quite often the questions we've heard from researchers over the years. There's very familiar pain points. We know that researchers struggle with all of these things. And that's why we do these training events, isn't it, Gareth?
Absolutely, absolutely. These questions do change quite significantly on a year-to-year basis, we've noticed, but generally the themes, the issues, the pain points, the problems that researchers face writing and publishing papers are generally quite consistent. So we should get into it. We should start answering those top 10 plus one questions from 2025, right, Scott?
We should. I'd like to ask you a question, though, Dr. Dyke. Maybe
Okay,
for the
go
benefit of
ahead.
guests who are joining us, we have, I think, some new guests joining us for the first time. Tell us
Mm.
a little bit about the research that you do. And I'd like to ask our guests to tell us about some of the work that our guests do. So in the chat, I'd like everyone to tell us what kind of research you're doing. And Dr. Dyke, tell us about yourself and the research that you've done.
Wow, that's a great question. I was for many years a paleontologist, so I'm still kind of doing research a little bit with different universities here in Central and Eastern Europe, in Hungary, Romania, Slovakia, these kinds of places. Also a lot of work in China, but my research has been on the relationship between birds and dinosaurs and the evolution of bird wings and flight and feathers and things like that. So that's my research. And as Scott mentioned, tell us a little bit about yours. What are you working on? Because our first question is going to be all about choosing a great research topic. So let's have a think about that. Scott, are we ready to get going?
Okay, let's jump in. Looking forward to hearing your answers, everyone. And please share your research and your location in the chat. And over to you, Dr. Dyke.
All right, brilliant. Well, this is question one from the big master list that Scott shared a moment ago. He's tinkered around with it. He's done a few things using his various AI tools, but we are going to hopefully give you some insights in this event to many of the questions that researchers do tend to ask. And the first of the questions is this one. How do I choose a good research topic? Really important question at the start of any research program. Let's start thinking about those master's courses, PhD courses. You will be beginning the process of selecting a research topic and coming up with a good one, which of course means a topic that will lead to important, interesting, potentially paradigm shifting research is a difficult task for any researcher. So it's a common question that we do get asked. And in order to do it effectively, we would say that very important at the beginning to get into the right mindset for research. So things to think about before you start a research topic. You're going to be choosing that topic. We're going to talk about that in a moment, basing it usually around a question. Now, will that be an unanswered question, or will you be building research out on top of a question that is already understood, but adding new data, adding perhaps a new angle. And we also would strongly recommend at the outset to think about who your audience is going to be for that research question. Where might you end up publishing that particular research argument? Identifying your purpose and, of course, gathering all of the supporting details. But coming up with a research question is really, really important. And as Scott will talk about, I'm sure there are a number of great tools out there that you can use now, AI powered, AI driven tools to help you discover potentially fruitful unanswered questions in your particular research area. Research Rabbit is one such tool, for example. You put in research information, you ask it about your topic, and it gives you potential new directions that you could take with your research. But above all, it's important to keep in mind this checklist. We call it the finer research question checklist. It's really, really important as an aid memoir, as a way of thinking about how you can develop important and interesting research question. Is your research feasible? Is what you want to work on actually going to be doable within the time that you have? Is your research interesting? Is it novel? Is it ethical? And will it be relevant? The finer research question, research checklist is a great place to start as you start to begin to build an idea about what you will work on for your research question. Does your study address an important problem? Are you going to be building upon or expanding current scientific knowledge? Is your work feasible both to implement and also to investigate? So have a think about the finer research checklist and have a go at self-evaluating your research ideas as you begin the process of finding a great question to work on with your research. So that's question one, and I hope that my answer to it was somewhat useful. The second top question of the 11 that we're going to go through in this event today is this one. Question 2 from Scott's master list of really popular research questions from 2025. How can I write and publish a truly impactful paper? Great question. We're all under pressure as researchers to get our research published in the best possible journals, the journals with the best impact factor, the best circulation, the best reach. How can you do it? How can you write and publish a truly impactful research paper? Well, the first place to start is, of course, that research question that we talked about in question 1. And once you've identified a great impactful research question, drill down into it and make sure when you write your paper up for publication, you're really letting your readers know what the research question is, because this sets up an expectation when they look at the paper, when they engage, when they read the paper, what is going to be talked about. So we're going to be using explicit phrases, clear and simple English. We're going to be using question words, whether or which, keeping our English language simple, straightforward and easy to understand, stating the hypothesized effect, and also, of course, identifying the type of variables and study design very, very clearly. One of the really big problems that researchers face, especially in the peer review process, is with their study design and explaining their method clearly and effectively. So we've got this impact checklist that you can also have a look at when you begin to put a research paper together to maximize the impactness, the impactfulness of your study. So as you are working through your research and thinking about where you're going to publish it during the project, put as many outputs as possible online. Submit your work for conferences and other speaking engagements. Build up a network of people interested in your research. On publication, you're going to be connecting the final publication to other related outputs, summarizing your work in plain language, and telling people about your publication. Not a lot of researchers do this. They usually do what I used to do when I was a researcher. Pretty much nothing. Just sit back and wait for the paper to get picked up by the media and so on. Talk about your research. Put those outputs online. Tell people that you've published. And on an ongoing basis, part through 3 of our impact checklist, keep your work alive by connecting it to new materials. Measure which communication channels, perhaps social media, blogs, talking about your work at conferences, which of these were most effective for you in terms of raising awareness about your work, and do more of those. So, writing clearly, signaling your research question, keeping a consistent order, repeating key terms, keeping a consistent point of view, putting your parallel ideas in parallel forms, using plain and simple English and topic sentences. If you'd like more information about writing effectively in English, do have a quick look at the Bentham Science YouTube channel, where several of our previous events about English language writing skills are to be found. And you can get into those events, have a listen, see how we recommend that you can become more effective as a writing and publishing academic, working and writing in English. Above all, your English should be short, short sentences, no unnecessary words, using familiar words, words that other people are able to understand, keeping in mind that most of your readers, most of the people who will engage with your research paper are not going to be native speakers. So active voice. No more of those passive, we did this, I did this, our team did this. A clear style and good punctuation. Simple English, one of the best tips for writing an impactful, easy to understand and easy to engage with research paper is to keep the English as simple as possible. Right, Scott? Scott's working with non-native speakers in Japan all the time, so he can attest to this, right, Scott?
Yeah, definitely. It's great advice, and it applies especially for people for whom their first language is not English. I work with a lot of researchers here in Japan and Southeast Asia and also in Europe who have excellent English skills and sometimes want to show off those excellent skills. But a manuscript is not the place to show off your excellent English. Save that for your conference talks. In the manuscript, keep it simple, keep it clear, concise, and simple. And then often researchers will ask, well, what about my technical language? I work in a very highly technical field. Most scientific fields are highly technical. You need to use technical terms and very complicated language sometimes, but that's all the more reason to keep your language as simple as possible. You do need to use terms that people in your field will recognize and understand as being scientific and technical terms, but keep it simple, clear, and concise. And your readers will thank you because remember, most of them are not native English speakers or readers either. Most of your readers will be non-natives of English. Keep it clear and simple.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's the first 2 of our top 10 plus 1 questions for our event
Mhm.
today. This is a really great question, and some issues here always in the research papers that we see. How can I write a stronger method section? Very, very important. As I mentioned already, the method section of your research article is probably an area where you may encounter issues in the peer review process because generally speaking, editors and peer reviewers look very carefully at the methods section. So you need to explicitly state your study design. Provide all the methodological details necessary for another researcher, another scientist to replicate your work. This is really, really important. One of our top tips for being a successful writing and publishing researcher: show your methods section to other researchers in your field before you send it to a journal. Write a clear narrative of the steps you took in your experiment or study and decide which information needs to be there in detail because, of course, you can provide further information, experimental details as a supplement later. But show your method to other researchers, your supervisor, other researchers in your field in order to make sure that enough information is there, is present for another researcher to be able to repeat the study. Describe your analysis, the statistics. It's really common, as we note here, for editors to reject papers because authors use the wrong method to answer a question. Give enough detail, as I mentioned, so a qualified reader can repeat your study. And again, if your method section is a bit thin, on details, then editors and reviewers similarly will worry that you might be hiding something. So do have a good look at your method section, show it to other people, make sure it's bulletproof before you send it to the journal. And don't be doing any of the data hacking, data dredging, fishing expeditions, p-hacking, harking, or cherry picking that we often do see in data collection components of research papers. These are the 5 common types of unethical data hacking. Basically, they all refer to the same kind of thing. You collect data, you then massage that data to get the answer that you want, or you change the data or delete some of the data collection in order to get the result that you want in your article. That's unethical. If you'd like to learn more about research ethics, publication ethics, do again, as I mentioned, have a look at the Bentham Science YouTube channel where you will find lots and lots and lots of our previous recordings on this and other topics. Question 4 of our 10+1 fantastic research questions of 2025. How can I show my results more effectively? It's a great question. And of course, in your results section, you are only going to be talking about the outcomes of your study, just the facts and nothing but the facts, ordered around primary and secondary outcomes, and often in the same order as the method section. A great tip: you've got your method section. It's organized according to outcomes, timelines, what you did first, what you did second, what you did third in terms of collecting and analyzing your data. Put your results section into a similar sequence and state clearly and simply what you found using words and numbers. You can use tables and figures and then describe those tables and figures in the text of your results. And you don't want to duplicate information between the text and the tables. Again, lots of great information on the Bentham Science YouTube channel if you'd like to learn more. But before presenting your data as figures, do have a quick think about the kind of data you are presenting. The main feature that you want to get across to the reader. Get across to the reader the message. What is it that you want me or Scott or someone else reading your paper to gain from looking at that particular figure? So how will this information be used? Who are the audience for this particular image, for this particular figure? If it's a technical paper, you may need to include less explanatory information than if it's a figure for a talk for a school, for example. Charts, tables, and diagrams are there to help the reader interpret the data, not really to give them all of the necessary information. So do have a think about these tips for effective data collection. Before starting to create a figure, it's important to think, what is the one thing that I want my audience to walk away thinking about? Keep it simple. Effective research article figures convey one message, and you do want to repeatedly emphasize that in the text, in the figure caption of your article. So what's the main message of the figure that you're putting together? That's how you design the figure to make sure people get that out of the image. Great question, which brings us swiftly on to question 5, if I'm not losing count of the questions that we've gone through so far. Scott, how's my counting going?
You're spot on. Yes, this is question number 5. Sorry, I didn't include numbers here. This is question 5. How can I write better titles and abstracts? And this is something that we find a lot of researchers tend to skip over. They feel like, okay, I've got the meat of my paper done. The title is just an add-on. The abstract is just an add-on. But that's not quite true, is it, Gareth? Why are titles and abstracts so important?
Oh, these are absolutely critical because these are the windows into your research article. And very often, as we know, the only part of your research paper that someone else is potentially going to read. Right, Scott? How many times have you read all the way through a research article?
Well, when citing a paper, hopefully I only cite papers I've actually read. But when I'm browsing for research, perhaps to include in a literature review, then yeah, of course you're going to go from titles and abstracts, absolutely. And it's not just other readers citing your work, but it's also editors who also pay close attention to the abstracts. Isn't that right?
Absolutely. Often editors will look at the abstract, the title, make an initial decision about what to do with the paper, maybe send it out for peer review or not. So these really do need to be spot on. And so this is question 5 from our audience, from people that we've talked to over the course of the year in all of the many webinars that we've done. Effective titles attract readers. You can see a few examples here on the slide. You really do want to use the fewest number of words to describe your paper and aim for less than 12 or so in the title. Less than 12 is a good number. In the title, you identify the main issue of the study. Begin with the subject. Be accurate, unambiguous, and specific with your title, and don't include abbreviations or jargon that nobody outside of your specific subject area is going to be able to understand. We see this a lot in research article titles. It immediately makes the title accessible to only a small number of people. And you may want to be what we call non-declarative with your research article title. And you've got two examples of those kinds of article titles here on the slide, not giving away the answer to the question that your paper addresses in the title. That would be what we call a declarative title if you give away the answer. My new drug is the cure for cancer is a declarative title, whereas my new drug and its effects on cancer would be what we call a non-declarative title. And that's really what many journals are looking for. Something that hooks the reader, gets them interested, and gets them thinking, I really want to read more of this study. And on your abstract, that's marketing, that's advertising, that's how you sell your research to the wider world. So a good quality abstract is honest, of course, and precise. It can stand alone, containing no technical jargon, short and specific, and containing minimal or no references. Don't forget, this is often all that people are going to read to make a decision about your paper. Many journals base their initial decisions on the quality of your abstract. So it's got to sell four key points of your research. And you can write a really great, effective abstract for a paper or for a conference presentation just by writing down these 4 questions and then answering them with information from your own study. Why did you do it? What did you do? What did you find? And what did you conclude? What does it all mean? Why? What did you do? What did you find? And what does it mean? The introduction, methods, results, and discussion. Make editors and readers want to read your paper. Have a go at these 4 questions for writing a fantastic research article abstract. It works, doesn't it, Scott? It really, really works.
Yeah, this is great information. I think for yourself and myself, we've worked on a lot of manuscripts. I think we've edited a lot of papers for researchers and for our students. And one thing I find is that the most effective research papers read like a story, a great mystery. What's a mystery that you solved as a researcher? That's the exciting thing about being researchers is solving problems and solving mysteries. And having a non-declarative title hooks the reader because the reader wants to know, oh, wait, what is the correlation or what is the what is the impact of drug X on condition Y? And that pulls the reader in. And then by framing an abstract this way, you've basically set the stage. You've explained, well, this is what the mystery is and why we did the study. This is what we did. This is what we found. It's an exciting result. And then put it in the context of research. What does it mean? What's your conclusion and discussion? This format really makes a compelling abstract. It works really every time. So this is great advice, Dr. Dyke. Thank you.
Give it a go, everybody. In many of our face-to-face workshops, Scott and I write these questions down. People then answer them with information from their own study. You can delete the questions, rub them off the board or whatever, delete them from your computer screen. You'll end up with a working abstract for your next paper. Which brings us on, I think, to question 6. How can I choose the right journal for my paper, for my manuscript? This is a very common question, a very problematic question for many researchers around the world. What we do have is our pirate code for journal selection. Aim high, go to journals with higher impact factors, preferentially first. But of course, choose appropriately, and that's why we're here. That's why your supervisor, other researcher colleagues in your department are there to help you get to the point as a researcher where you can self-evaluate. You can decide where the target journal bands for your research will be. How significant is this piece of work? How can it be published in a particular journal? So aim high, choose appropriately, and then of course our events, our training, Sci-Train and Bentham Science, we're here to help you sell and manage your submissions. But when it comes to looking at potential journals, do evaluate them carefully. Don't do what many researchers do and just submit to the first journal that comes to mind. I used to do that. It's a bad strategy. Have a moment, take some time to properly evaluate the journal that you are going to potentially use. What's its impact factor? What's its reputation? Is it reputable? Who's on the board? What's the reach of the journal within the field? Do your colleagues know? Do they use this journal? And is it open access? What type of open access? Evaluating journals is really, really important. Impact factor, reputation, reach within the field, and open access or not. Very, very important. We've got this checklist, 6 ways to self-evaluate your paper before selecting a journal. Do have a look at this. It's really a great way to begin to think about where your paper could go. How novel, how good, have you minimized bias? What are the real world implications of your study, and is it ethically compliant? And lastly, most importantly, is your writing highly readable and suitable for non-specialist readers? Have a look at our checklist for self-evaluating your paper, which is similar and leads us on to question 7, right, Scott?
It does. And just before we get on to avoiding predatory journals, I love the last point on that previous slide, Gareth, about readability. Again, we've mentioned readability now at least twice in this event today. So it's not just enough to present your wonderful science and your wonderful and explicit methods and results, but also to write clearly and readably, because ultimately we have to consider our readers, and making sure that your writing is clear and readable is vitally important. It's just as important as the rigors of your science and your methods. So yeah, good
Absolutely,
advice.
absolutely. And if you have any questions about readability or writing, or if you need us to help you with a paper that you're working on, do get in touch with us. You can get in touch with us through Bentham Science, through Sci-Train, or through our LinkedIn profiles. We'd love to hear from you. We always like to help researchers with their specific problems, which is one of those specific problems, one of those questions is, of course, question 7. How can I avoid fake journals and conferences? Watch out for fake journals. Watch out for fake conferences. Some open access journals are fake, also known as predatory. They'll try to cheat you out of your money and out of your research. And these kinds of journals are getting more and more sophisticated. And it can be really difficult for researchers to identify the difference between real and fake journals. So based on that open access publishing model, journals are interested in getting access to your funding, to your money, to charging you an article processing charge. So have a look how to spot a fake journal. Is the website strange? Is the journal indexed in a reputable place, such as the famous DOAJ, the Directory of Open Access Journals? Who's on the editorial board? Are the members unknown, or do they not actually work for the journal? How regularly is the journal publishing papers? Is it publishing regularly or not? How are the articles? Are they being peer reviewed? Because they should be being properly peer reviewed if the journal is reputable. And never, ever, ever ever pay a journal any fees at submission. This is not normal practice. In publishing, you should never be charged anything by a journal or a publisher until after your paper is finally accepted. And be aware as well of spam emails full of empty promises. These are ways to spot a fake journal. How do I know a real one? Well, it will be listed, it will be indexed, and we've given you a few of the major indexes here on the slide. The journal will have a robust peer review process. Bentham Science has one of the most robust peer review processes of any publisher, by the way, and the fees and policies are fair, clearly listed and explained in detail. And what we've done is we've put a few key links here on the slide so you can have a look at great websites like Think, Check, Submit, the DOAJ, the DOAJ, the Directory of Open Access Journals, publicationethics.org, that's the website of COPE, the Committee on Publication Ethics, and OASPA, ways to spot a real journal. We've given you a few more resources here for selecting ethically open access journals, and maybe you'll have a look at these after the event. But Think, Check, Submit is a great resource, guidelines on choosing a trusted journal. So that's a really fantastic question. Same with conferences. thinkcheckattend.org is a great resource for you to make sure that the conference that you're about to go to or about to send a registration fee to is a real conference, right, Scott?
Right. The number of fake conferences is growing year by year. And just like fake journals, they're becoming more and more sophisticated. We always mention this during these events that you need to check carefully and make sure that it's a legitimate conference before turning over your money and your research. So check the links that we put in the chat there and yeah, make sure that it's a real legitimate journal or
Nothing worse
conference.
than nothing worse than spending your hard-earned money or your university's hard-earned money on something that's not really real. And this is a really great question, right, Scott? Is publishing in open access journals worth it? Worth the cost of paying APCs? I believe this might be question 8, unless I'm sadly
It is
mistaken.
question 8. You're counting perfectly, even though I failed to number the slides. You're keeping up. I can see we're keeping you awake, Gareth. We did have several questions even tonight about open access publishing, including a question, does Bentham charge APC charges? Yes, of course, like any open access journal, Bentham does charge fair APCs for publishing in open access journals. One question we often get from researchers, Gareth, is perhaps we can explain for early career researchers who might be joining us tonight. For example, what is open access and why do open access journals charge APCs or article processing charges to publish your paper? Can you explain some of the details, or excuse me, some of the basics of open access and APCs for any younger researchers who might be joining?
Yeah, sure, sure. I mean, we've all published papers or we've all seen journals that publish according to what we call a traditional model. And that's a journal that sells its content to libraries or universities or even to individuals. So in those journals, the traditional journals, you don't have to pay anything to publish. The journal will publish your work after peer review, but then not everybody around the world, and not even you necessarily, would have access to the published paper because the journal is not open. Only subscribers or purchasers of that content can get access to the final published article. This is traditional journal publishing, and it's been around since, the 1920s, 1930s in some form or another. Open access publishing, on the other hand, is where everybody can access your article after peer review and publication. And this is either done by a traditional journal charging you an APC and converting your paper to a fully open access article. This is called a hybrid publishing model, or the journal itself is fully open access, like Frontiers, PLOS, MDPI. Many, many, many examples of fully open access journals. But to make money, the journals charge the researcher or the institution or the funding agency an article processing charge. So that's a long-winded explanation of what the process is. Traditional versus open publishing. In open publishing, there's usually an APC. Hope that explains things. Scott?
That's very helpful. Thank you, Dr. Dyke. And so a question that we often get is it worth it to pay that APC, that processing charge? Is it worth it for researchers? Well, I guess it depends on your circumstance and who's paying.
Absolutely, absolutely. It depends on what you are expected to do. And generally speaking, researchers around the world are expected by their funding agencies, by their universities, by their governments to publish their papers in the best journals possible. So journals that are in Scopus Q1, Q2, journals that have decent impact factors. And this can very often mean traditional journals because they have often decent impact factors. But another condition of your funding or your institution or your government might be that the publication that you create is open access, in which case you are going to probably, in many cases, have to find funding support for these APCs, which could come from your institution, your grant, or even, unfortunately, sometimes from your own pocket. There's the difference again for you. Traditional versus open access publishing. The key differences on this slide. In traditional publishing, the paywalls restrict access. In open access, everybody can publish there, but there's a funding component that's required, an APC that's required. And I talked through this already in the answer I just gave to Scott's question. Gold open access, that's where everything is open. Anybody can read your paper, but there's going to be probably an article processing charge for that publication. Green open access, to make it a bit more confusing, this is where you're publishing open access or in a traditional journal, but you put the last version of your paper on an institutional repository or on a website like ResearchGate or academia to make a late stage version of your work open. And rarely you'll encounter what we call diamond open access. That's where a society or an institution is publishing a journal and providing free access to anybody. So do have a look at these as well. Diamond open access may be a good way to go in some cases. But these are the kinds of open access publishing. The benefits of publishing open access, though, you get a lot more citations. 7 times the citations in many cases. You get access to tools like Altmetrics that give your work greater impact and visibility. Often publishing open access makes you compliant with funding agency mandates, and it gives you immediate access to a lot more collaborations and researchers around the world. So open access publishing, we would argue, levels the playing field for researchers around the world. Although often that cost for publishing makes it a little bit more difficult for researchers to participate. But anyway, that was question 8. Question 8, is paying an article processing charge for an open access paper worthwhile? Here's question 9. How long does it usually take to publish in reputable journals? And how can I speed up the process? How long does it take? Well, of course, time to publication is super, super important. It's one of the key elements that researchers look for, as you can see here, when selecting a journal. Time to publish, the reach and readership, and the impact factor are really, really important. But we don't want for the paper to take ages. If you end up waiting more than about 6 to 8 weeks for peer reviews to come back on your submitted paper, it's time to write to the editor. Don't wait. Get in touch. Communicate with the editor, but be polite when you do so. Where's my paper? I've waited 2 months is not a polite way to write to the editor. I'm writing to ask if I can do anything to help speed up my recent submission. May I suggest additional peer reviewers would be a much better way to speed up the process. It usually takes about 3 months from submission to publication, including peer review, to get a paper published. So as we already mentioned, if you're waiting more than 6 to 8 weeks, get in touch with the journal editor. That was question 9. Here comes question 10. How can I respond effectively to peer reviewer comments? A great question and a real problem for researchers around the world. Well, when you get those peer review comments back from the journal editor, it's really important to respond positively and respectfully. Make sure editors and peer reviewers feel good about your responses. Do all of the things that you're being asked to do, if you can, to show the editor and the peer reviewers that you take the process seriously. Give them a document that interleaves your comments with the remarks from the peer reviewers, and be polite. We've given you here a number of good and bad examples of how you could respond to peer review: being positive, being constructive, helping the reviewers to understand what you've done and acknowledging their contributions, rather than being rude. And as we often see with authors from around the world, do a document like this where you put your comments into the comments that you receive back from the journal in a different color or in a different font, so that the editor can easily see what you've done and how you've done it. We've made almost all the changes requested, and we enclose a revised manuscript. Changes to our paper can be seen in red in the main document and in the figure captions for example. Here's a worked example of that. We would like to thank Reviewer 1, and we have reworked our analyses as required. Thank you for this editorial comment. We have corrected our paper throughout. These are tips and tricks from our experience to help you effectively respond to reviewer comments, which is the top 10. And Scott, what he's done is he's thrown in this extra one to keep us on our toes at the end of our event today. A really great question. What's it? It's a great one, isn't it? About nervousness when presenting your research.
This really was one of our top questions this past year, and it makes sense. Everyone feels nervous about presenting our work. So this is our bonus question for this year's top 10, now top 10 plus one. This is number 11 in our top 10 plus one. How do I overcome nervousness presenting my research? Great
Really
question.
important, really important. And of course, you're going to have to do presentations about your research. We used to get super nervous when we were giving presentations about our research as students. Don't forget that it's completely normal to get nervous before a presentation. Everybody does, but you are the expert. You're the expert on your research. Nobody else knows more than you in the audience at your presentation. You are going to be presenting from a position of strength. Start planning your talk well in advance so you'll feel confident and well prepared. And of course, practice makes perfect. Practice means you know what to expect from your own presentation. These are great tips to get less nervous about giving a presentation. So don't read directly from a script. Follow a simple outline. Time your slides and transitions. Practice in front of a mirror or record yourself on a phone or computer to get the transitions and timings right. I know Scott does this, by the way. Practice in front of colleagues, family, friends, and get their feedback, and plan points where you're going to engage with the audience with comments and anecdotes, etc. So practice makes perfect. You're going to be surviving that Q&A at the end, just like we're going to be surviving the Q&A in a moment in this webinar. You can anticipate likely questions and think of possible answers. Timing your talk is really, really important. And when you're asked a question, repeat it so that the audience can also hear it. And of course, this gives you time to think. We've got lots of tips for managing the Q&A, Scott, and I think we're almost at that point with this webinar today.
Yes, let's take our own medicine and use our own tips as we address questions from our audience. I'll go through a couple of bonus questions here. These were questions that were submitted by attendees tonight. One of our guests asks, Dr. Singh asks, how can I become an editor in your journal, in Bentham Journals? Great question. We'll reach out to you with some information on how you can reach out to the Bentham team to find out about applying for editorial positions at a Bentham Journal. Great question. Thank you, Dr. Singh. We'll reach out to you after the event. Another question from our guest was, how can we ethically use generative AI for manuscript preparation? Fantastic question. It's also one of our most asked questions. And because it's such an asked question, we will be addressing that question with a special event in the coming new year. So please come and join our event on AI ethics, ethically using AI for manuscript writing. That'll be an event coming up in 2026. So we'll send you information on that event when it comes up. Great question. Thank you very much. Another question here from our guest is, what makes a good researcher? What an excellent question. Dr.
Wow.
Dyke, you're a voluminously published researcher, whereas I am not. Can you give us some tips on what makes a good researcher?
Well, this is a great question. We could talk for a long time about this question because
We need a
like
special event, maybe.
I mean like what makes a great researcher? Well, a lot of people would argue that how you're measured as a researcher is not the same as your skills as a researcher. But what makes you great? I mean, that's basically these days, unfortunately or fortunately, that will be assessed or that will be answered based on your outputs. And there is a school of thought that says that it doesn't matter how great you are as a researcher, if you're not publishing, if you're not sharing your research with the world, then nobody knows, and there's nothing to judge you or evaluate you based upon. So, actually, my answer to this question would be a great researcher is somebody who's addressing interesting and important questions, but is also making an impact with their research. And that means both through publications, but also by driving socioeconomic impact, like by making a difference to people with your research. So think about those two related elements when we answer that question. But I would also say that if you don't do anything with your research results, then how do I know? And what difference are you making? Like, is that being a great researcher? It's a really interesting question. You're quite right, Scott. Why don't we have a special event just on that in the new year?
I would look forward to joining that event and learning from you how I can become a better researcher. That's a great question. I think communication is key. You mentioned that at the end there. If you just sit on your results, then you're going to minimize your impact. So a lot of what we do here in these events is based on science communication. So I think that's also a key element. Great question. Fantastic question. Here's another fantastic question. Our guest Omar asks, how can I make my research accessible to the general public? This is a great question, especially for you, Gareth, as you've published in some major publications, general audience publications like Science and Nature and so on. How can someone make their research accessible to the general public? Any quick tips? That's worth a special
Well,
event as well.
it is, and we do actually have a special webinar event like on this kind of communication. So again, do have a look at the Bentham Science YouTube channel. You'll find recordings of our events on this kind of topic there. I mean, the answer to this, I think, Omar, is to talk about your research in ways that everybody can understand what you did. Let's imagine you've just published a technical paper in a technical journal. Are you going to talk about that on a blog or on a podcast or in a video or in a summary? Are you going to provide a way associated with your research so that everybody can access that research? Lots of journals and publishers provide that as a service. They'll put like a what they call a lay summary or an easy to understand summary of your research onto the website next to the technical paper. They might ask you to provide a graphical abstract. That's a great way as well, like a picture that explains what you discovered, how your research is important. But I would say, talk about your work, blog about your work, come on podcasts and do interviews, talk to the media, make a short video in which you explain why your work is so important and interesting. This is how you can have more impact and reach a wider audience, I would say. Great question.
Great question and great answer. Thank you, Gareth. One thing that I remember you saying is if you can explain your science to your local bus driver or to your grandma, then you're probably on the right path in making your research understandable and accessible to the general readers. Great question and great answer. Thank you, Gareth. Let's see another question, another AI related question, how to avoid plagiarism resulting from using AI in research writing? Again, great question. AI can actually be a very powerful tool in helping you avoid plagiarism. So we'll talk about that in our special AI event coming up in the new year. Great question. Great question. Here's another question that we sometimes get asked, and that is, why is it that publishers will charge APCs for open access publishing, but then peer reviewers themselves do not get paid for doing peer review? Well, that's an interesting question. And any thoughts on this, Gareth? I know you talk a lot in the peer review sphere with your colleague Maria. I know it's quite complex how the business models work, but in brief, how is it that journals can charge APCs, but then they don't pass any remuneration on to peer reviewers?
It's a fantastic question. And the short and simple answer, at least in my opinion, is that journals and publishers should be providing some remuneration, some support to peer reviewers. Doesn't necessarily have to be money, but it should be something, recognition, certificates, discounts, access to services. Because of course, you're quite right. Like journals and publishers rely on the free unpaid work of other experts, scientists, researchers to evaluate papers for publication. And then they charge, often in the open access model, quite high article processing charges. And it's no secret in the publishing industry that actually the margin, the profit that publishers make per paper can be very, very large. So I would answer that by saying it's not right that peer reviewers don't get anything for the work that they do, the free unpaid work that they do. It would be nice if publishers did something. It would also be nice if research institutions, governments, and funding agencies recognized the work that researchers do on peer review as well. So when you get assessed by your university for promotion, it's not just the publications and the grants that you've gotten, it's also the peer reviews that you've looked at that should be part of that
Mm.
process. So it's not just a publisher problem, I would argue, although, of course, to answer your question, where's all the money going? Some of it should be coming back to peer reviewers. I actually agree. So great question, and thank you for it.
That's a great question. Yeah. And we've got time perhaps for just one more, but it's a big one. And it's one that a lot of researchers asked us. And perhaps this also deserves a special event. But very briefly, Gareth, a lot of questions um, came in from researchers and guests about how to conduct research with limited funding. So if you're constrained, how can you conduct the best research? And we also had a number of questions in the chat from Theodore and other guests asking about, for example, the implications of APC charges for developing countries and researchers in certain areas who may not have the same access to funding. These are fantastic questions, and I wish we had answers to all of them. So I think we need to dedicate a special event to questions from Theodore and other guests. But in brief, Gareth, any quick tips for conducting research with limited resources or funding?
I think this is a great question, and I totally agree, Scott. We should do a special like webinar, a special event on this. To answer that or to address the second part of that question first, talk to publishers because very often you'll find that open access publishers do offer support, reductions, discounts, or even free publication in their journals if you are from a region or country that has been classified or identified as like a developing region or resource poor region. So I wouldn't just suck it up and pay the APC. I would talk to the journal at the outset and say, hey, I'm from X, Y, and Z country. I'm a PhD student because very often they also offer discounts for PhD students and graduate students, but they don't advertise it. So talk to them and say, I am a PhD student from X, Y, and Z country. Can I get a discount? Can I get this APC waived? Because very often they'll do it. And I find that not enough researchers talk to publishers about these questions. The first part of the question about doing research when resources are limited is much, much harder for us to answer in a short format event like this. I mean, unfortunately, I would initially react to that question by saying that you must or you should identify areas of research where you're able to do research without needing a great deal of resources. And, I've worked myself in countries where resources are super, super limited, but there are lots of research questions that we can, for example, address. Working on birds, for example, we can do lots of observational and ecological and behavioral research that doesn't require us to gene sequence and spend a lot of money on chemicals, reagents, and lab work, for example. But I know it's very different in different fields. You obviously can't do atmospheric physics if you don't have access to the right equipment and tools. So let's do a special event on that because I think there's a huge amount that we can do to help and advise and guide researchers around these questions of finance. Scott, great question. Fantastic.
Fantastic question. And as you always say, Gareth, don't hesitate, communicate. As Gareth says, reach out to journals and see if there are any possibilities for you in the region where you are. So great questions. We had so many good questions about funding, about disparities or regional bias between global north and global south. That also deserves its own event. Fantastic questions. So thank you, Theodore. Thank you, Nadia, for your questions about that. Sorry, we don't have comprehensive answers for you within this brief event. But feel free to reach out to us and we'll see if we can get you some information from Bentham's side on some opportunities that might be available to you. But thank you everyone so much for joining this event tonight. And we got some wonderful questions. Gareth, we really put you in the hot seat tonight, answering all these questions. And we will send everyone the full video. If you missed anything or you were joining late or you just couldn't log in, no worries at all. We'll send you the link to the full video. You can see all of Garrett's responses to your questions. And thank you all so much for joining us for our events this year. And thank you, Gareth, for always generously sharing your expertise in publishing and editorship and everything. I always enjoy doing these events together with you, Gareth. Thank you so much for all the events this year.
Absolutely. Great to work together, Scott. Have a great rest of the year, everybody. Don't forget to follow Bentham Science on all of their social media channels. If you're looking for a Christmas present for one of your friends, send them this slide. I'm sure they'd love to sign up for Bentham Science social media. Have a great end to the year. We'll see you next year. And thanks again, Scott. Take it easy.
Thanks, everyone. Happy holidays. Happy New Year.